Welcome. Great to have you with us on the show today. We are finally to the football opener, which will be tomorrow at Beaver Stadium when Penn State takes on West Virginia. You go through, and I know people will ask about, quote, starters, which is natural and completely understand it. I have a different view on starters because, to me, anybody that's going to be playing significant minutes when the game is on the line, to me, is in the starter category. In other words, they think you're good enough to play when the game is on the line and in the balance. Could be in the first quarter, second quarter, could be in the third, whatever. So when I look at, let's just take a basic, Johnny Dixon, Kalen King. Okay, everybody knows that when the game opens up, they'll be out there as the corners. But I look at Cam Miller as a starter because Cam Miller is going to play significant minutes, significant number of plays. I look at Daquan Hardy as a starter because he's going to play a significant amount of plays. Some of them, of course, in sub packages and sometimes at a corner. And that's just an example of guys that will play. Four corners will play. Well, four safeties are going to play. Keaton Ellis and KJ Winston and Jalen Reed and Zakee Wheatley. They'll all play in the game. To me, all four of them are starters. It's just they're two that will open the game. So that's how I look at it. I look at the possibility of 10, possibly 11 defensive linemen playing. I look at the possibility of 6 to 7 linebackers playing. I look at the possibility of 8, 9, maybe 10 defensive backs playing at one point or another. Wide receivers. Let's see, how many wideouts could play? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. Wide receivers could play. 3 tight ends. 3 running backs. Offensive line. Offensive line's a little trickier because they don't usually rotate and sub in, but there are 8 guys that can play on the offensive line right away, out of the gate can play. And that's why when I talk about a starting lineup, so what did I name? I named 8, 16, 24, 25 guys on offense. I listed, 10, 17 plus 8, 9, 26 guys on defense. That's 51 guys. Now, some guys will get fewer plays than others. But I think the way the game has changed, where the ones, okay, and then finally you mix in later the twos for a series, or you mix in where the twos will then get in when the game is starting to warp in a certain direction. Those days are done. You have to have the ability to play a lot of people. You have to give them game experience. That's one of the reasons why when you look at a player like Cam Miller, they mixed him in last year. So Cam Miller is not a completely inexperienced player at corner. Now, a young guy like Zion Tracy, now he's a true freshman. Okay, so a big difference. But Miller's played. Winston has played. Wheatley obviously played a lot last year. Carter, you've got DeLuca has played. Elsdon and King, that's been a great competition. They've played. The only linebacker really hasn't played. Well, the only two that really haven't played a lot would be Tony Rojas, for obvious reasons, true freshman, and Keon Wiley. Okay? But other people have played. Same thing with the defensive front. Vandenberg's played. Durant's played. Izzard's played. Obviously, Ellies and Beeman have played. Hey, these guys have all played. And so you're not getting the drop-off in experience, and that's why I look at this team and I see guys that I would consider 51, maybe, right around there. And to me, in my mind, even though I know there are ones and twos, I got that. But if you're playing significant minutes, to me, you're in the starter category. right? Because then it gets to a point, if it turns out a guy's having a great game, you want that guy to finish even though he may have not been the guy to start. Right? So that's how I look at it. And I do understand people want to know what the starting lineup is. Yeah, there's a starting lineup. And look, through the preseason, you earned your starting lineup spot. You earned it. It doesn't mean that somebody else did something wrong. It just means that you earned it. It also doesn't mean that you've completely shut out the guy in back of you, because the guy in back of you, quote, is playing a lot of football in the game. That's why I look at them as all as starters. Like, it doesn't matter to me if Kobe King or Tyler Elsdon starts. They're both going to play. Mm-hmm. So to me, they're both starters. Maybe it's a different way of looking at it, but the idea is to be the fresher team in the fourth quarter. The idea is to be the fresher team in October. The idea is to be the fresher team in November. Right? And you also have to have people with the ability to not create a drop-off when they go in there. And if you have the confidence in anywhere from 40 to 51 guys, so we'll leave it that open-ended. If you have the confidence in 40 to 51 guys that can play and give you meaningful plays in games, now you have something special. A lot of people can run out 22. But what happens is that in the war of attrition, 22 gets tired in the fourth quarter. 22 is really tired by the middle of October. Right? Team playing 40 to 51 with either none or slight drop-off from the person that opens the game. And staying healthy, of course. They're the fresher team in the fourth quarter. They're the fresher team at the end of September. They're the fresher team when it gets to the end of October. And we talk about the way sports performance works these days. I talked to Josh Nelson extensively about, every time you get a chance to pick Josh Nelson's mind, you do that. Because he has everything charted out. Heart rates, everything from practices, games, speed that they put in, so forth. The idea is, instead of the old way of, okay, let's start first day of training camp, you're at 100, right? End of training camp, you might be 80, 85. End of September, you might be 70 to 75. The end of October, you might be 60 to 70. The end of November, you're down on 50 to 55, right? In terms of like your level. Mm-hmm. With sports performance, which helps in terms of how you practice, how much is put into practice, how you work in the weight room, how you travel, okay? And then you mix in the nutritionist with how you eat. The idea is now to take 100, and at the end of camp, you're 90 to 95. At the end of September, you're probably maybe 80. See how gradual it's now, 85. Maybe at the end of October, you're between 80 and 85. And then November, maybe you're 75, instead of being down at 45 or 50. So the scale is a gradual, because everybody's, it's going to decline. I mean, it's just the way it is. You're going to get tired. You're getting hit. You're getting beaten up. So instead of doing this, sliding down the slope, it now is a steadier, gradual line. And that's what you're trying to create. That's what your depth creates, how you practice creates that, how you sleep creates that, how you eat creates that. You don't go to a restaurant and order, and have your order just be 2 French fries. Oh, wait, I've seen you do that. West Virginia, Garrett Green, quick, athletic. Donaldson, running back, power, 238 pounds. Tight end out of LSU, player. You know how badly Penn State wanted Rodney Gallagher. He ended up going to West Virginia. Devin Carter came here, was going to come here, then changed his mind and ended up going to West Virginia. So that's how they've replenished their wide receiver spot. The center's really good, by the way. The center can play. He's an NFL guy. Good player. So they're going to have to deal with him. The tackles are okay. The good players, the guards, I'm kind of like a wait and see on them. And then defensively, Lance Dixon might be the best linebacker, played here at Penn State. Torbo Mulba, I think, is going to play for them. Maybe not start, but he's going to play for them on the defensive front. And I don't have the deal in front of me, but you watch the tape, and in the secondary, number 8 is good. He's a really good player. I don't think it's. I'm trying to think if that's Christian Stokes or not. Not sure. Maybe Stokes might be 31, but but they got Marcus, who's good back there. I mean, they have some players, and one of the keys to this game, like any key to any game, there's several things. Number one, okay, it's an opening game. Okay, be sharp on special teams. Okay, you go through the preseason, okay, and you'll do a lot of things full speed on special teams, but only to a point. You're not getting the returner decked on a play on special teams, for example. So you need to be sharp on special teams, 1. 2, be sharp and stay away from pre-snap penalties. And this is where the crowd comes in. West Virginia is going to have to operate with hand signals and silent counts because of the crowd noise in Beaver Stadium, which will make it a little more difficult, especially for their tackles, who are the furthest away from the ball, to deal with it. But as the home team, you can't have pre-snap penalties. Again, it's the opening game. So in the opening game, you have to be sharp on special teams. You have to stay away from pre-snap penalties, and I strongly believe get to the lead early in a game like this because you need to make the other guy play from behind, especially on the road. Okay. Next up, win the turnover battle. Big. Any game, no matter what, you need to win the turnover battle. Any game, right? So you're trying to stay away from the big mistake. Again, the opening game, big mistake. Hey, when I'm talking about pre-snap penalties, those are the unforced errors. Let's go to Florida-Utah last night. The coaching staff on a return had 2 guys with the same number out there. And it was one of those bad penalties that cost Florida. I mean, it was a big penalty in the game. And it was self-inflicted. You have to be sharp on all this. I mean, when people think of pre-snap penalties, they think about, jumping a count early, illegal motion, false starts, things like that. Yeah, those are pre-snap penalties. Lining up on defense offside, pre-snap penalty. Coaching staff sending out 2 guys with the same number, guess what? That's self-inflicted. Okay? So these are all things that you need to avoid. So then turnovers, big plays. Okay? Turnovers and big plays are always going to win it. And then make sure in a game that you win the middle 8. Final 4 minutes, first half, first 4 of the second half. They're tone setters. Can you get a 2 for none? All right? These are all those things that you need to do in an opening game. You don't have preseason games. So this is the starting point right here. And, West Virginia is coming up here on a bus, and guess what? Here's their quote: "This is an opportunity game, a big-time opportunity game." For Penn State, they just have to go out there and take care of their own business. Right? It'll have some ups and downs like any game. Don't lose your poise. Don't get flustered. Just play. And I think they're good enough to do that. If they've had the kind of camp that indicates that. Right? As for blocking out noise, in this era, it's almost impossible to do. You can't really control it. In the old days, you could make sure there are no newspapers in the buildings or anything like that. But today, you walk on campus, students all know who the players are. Hey, you guys are great. It's going to be a big year. You can win the whole thing. So they hear it. Next, Instagram. Everything's circulating on Instagram. Maybe some of them have Twitter. Okay, it seems like more and more young people seem to have Instagram more than Twitter. And I only get that gauging because I've asked my classes. Obviously it's a sample size of 20, 21 people. But I asked them the other day, I said, Instagram or Twitter? And almost everybody in the room had Instagram. A few had Twitter. But still, that's social media. Okay. Yeah. So it's finally here. I made a dozen appearances in the off season, various places, from South Carolina to Indianapolis to Pittsburgh and Hershey and Scranton and whatever. I was all over the place. And I've never seen the level of excitement from the fan base. Well, I haven't seen it to this level in a long time. There was a lot of anticipation before 17. Before that, the anticipation was maybe before the 86 season. Even 94, because remember, Penn State went 10-2 in 93, losing to Michigan here in the 1,000th game and losing out at Ohio State in the Halloween snowstorm. And Raymond Harris had a big day running the ball for Ohio State. So people didn't go into 94 going, oh, this is it. It wasn't until after the first three games everybody looked around and go, holy mackerel, these guys are unbelievable. I was talking to Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti last week, and he says, God, that 94 team. He says, I was here for the USC game. No. I said, yeah, it was 35-0 at halftime. Iowa's 35-0 at halftime.
Ohio State, same.
Yeah, that's later. I'm talking about early in the season. Remember, everybody's wondering, okay, how good will they be in 94, right? So there wasn't this. There was a little bit of anticipation because they closed out 93 by clobbering Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl with that huge second half. Kerry Collins had the throw back to Kyle Brady, and he took it in for a touchdown. So there was some anticipation after that, but they'd also lost to Ohio State and Michigan the year before. So now there was some anticipation, but not to this level. You have to take it week by week. And people hate when coaches take it week by week. Fans hate when coaches and players take it on a week by week basis because they want to see, hey, what do you think our chances are against Ohio State? Well, I mean, I totally understand why you would ask that question. I got it. Right? Or maybe, hey, I went to that game 2 years ago at Iowa. What do you think our chances are against Iowa? Okay, totally understand it. Totally. Right? So this is not in any way a knock on anybody that does that. Because not. You're, okay, as a fan who's paying good money, you're entitled to think anything you want, and you're entitled to jump over games that you don't perceive as important. Okay? Because you're not playing. You're not coaching. Okay? So, but if you're James Franklin and his staff and the players, you can't afford any stumble anywhere, so you do have to do it week by week by week by week. So this is step one. Step two is not Illinois. Step two is not Iowa. Step two is not Ohio State. But you can't get to that until you get through West Virginia first. So, all right, who do you have tonight? After your Williamsport route last week?
Yep, Downingtown East. Should be a very good one at Memorial Field.
Oh, good.
Yep. Last year was a State College winning on a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. So that should be a very good game.
Oh, yeah, I remember
always a great team.
I remember that game.
Yeah.
All right, so the ACC will be inviting in Cal, Stanford, and SMU. They could only afford 4 no votes. When they did informal polling, North Carolina, NC State, Florida State, and Clemson were said to be in informal polling no votes. This is in formal polling by the conference, not by the media. Okay? There were said to be no votes. Well, they got one to switch. North Carolina State. So the Atlantic Coast Conference is now going to have two teams near the Pacific. The Atlantic Coast Conference is going to have a team deep in the heart of Texas. SMU will not get any money from the TV deal. It must be nice to have those kind of donors.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Okay. But it puts them back in the big leagues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. Cal and Stanford, my understanding, 30% of the new revenue that comes in. So they'll get 30%. So if, let's just do it on round numbers, okay? Round numbers. Say each school in the ACC got $50 million from the TV deal. Cal and Stanford would get 15 each. 30%, okay? You took a math class, right?
I did. A couple of them.
Because you're blanking out on it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how they're going to do it. What do they do with the extra money? Because ESPN is going to give them extra money to do this. So what are they going to do with the extra money? There'll be a portion of it that will be evenly divided among the existing schools. Right, so there'll be an initial windfall of cash. Look, it's not going to be a bucket load of it, okay? But each school could get at least an initial number of maybe 1.5 to 3.5 million, okay, as a starting point. Then after that, it sounds like what they're going to do is they're then going to put it into that pot that if somebody makes the college football playoff or by winning the conference championship, you get that bonus money. Okay? And that sounds like what they're going to do with it. This is an enticement to keep Florida State and Clemson from moving because now, hey, look, we brought you in extra revenue, right? And for all we know, quietly, Florida State and Clemson, who voted no on this, by the way, may get maybe a bigger share than everybody else out of this windfall and then have that extra money sitting based on performance. ACC title, New Year's Six bowl game, or college football playoff. So that's what they're going to do. I know some people think this is a play by the ACC that for Clemson and Florida State to leave, that they'll be able to hang in there and they'll leave and we've already covered it. We got Stanford, Cal, and SMU. I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I think they were trying to figure out a way to get more money into the conference. The only way to do it was to do it this way and to get reduced shares and a no share. Excuse me. And when you're getting, Stanford's only going to get 30% of what everybody else is getting. Cal's only going to get 30% of what everybody else is getting. SMU is going to get zero because that was their negotiating chip. We'll take nothing. Just get us. I go back to the grant of rights. I'm sorry. It's a simple document. Everybody signed it. Everybody knows it. Okay. You have had, the reports are 8 different schools have looked at it. How come everybody's over? The lack of common sense with this has been stunning. I have a connection with a board of trustees. Oh, for goodness sakes. How about a connection with a lawyer that looked at the document? Let's start with that. Do you have a connection with any lawyers that have looked at the document? You can get out of the grant of rights. It's just going to cost you a bucket load. So let's take Florida State. Hey, you look at the life of it through 2036, it's about $500 million. Well, it goes down each year you stay in. So by the end of the decade, it might be palatable to figure out the combination of an exit fee and a grant of rights negotiation, because now at least it'll be whittled down and more reasonable to work with. Right now, it's not reasonable to work with. It's a $120 million exit fee. Plus, no matter what you negotiate here, instead of $500 million, what's it going to be? Hey, we negotiate it down to $300? Really? Great. Terrific. Right. You ask yourself, is like in the room, you're looking around saying, okay, can we talk to the adults here for a second? Who's the adult in the room here? Hey, excuse me, you want to pay them $300 million? What are you doing? $300 million. And I know they've gone to Wall Street to see if they can raise some capital and so forth, but that's how difficult it had. They're poured over it. Right? You can bring in, okay? Florida State can bring in 5 different law firms to look at it. Guess what? Nobody can find the loophole. Nobody. What does it tell you? And again, I go back to Texas and Oklahoma. The ACC document is modeled after the Big 12. Now, the Big 12 has their document, and the business is actually, believe it or not, the Big 12's business, in terms of like where it is actually Delaware. Because Delaware's laws make it easier for them to, a lot of people have their business in Delaware. I mean, why do you think, MBNA and everybody like that, why do you think they're in Delaware? Yeah. Well, Big 12, that's where actually their model, even though their offices aren't there, but where they file is Delaware. Oh. Right. Well, they modeled the ACC, modeled its document after the Big 12. Well, why did Texas and Oklahoma pay $50 million each to get out of the last year? Okay. 21, we're going to the SEC. 21, they played football and basketball in the Big 12. Okay. 22, they played football and basketball in the Big 12. This year, they're playing football and basketball in the Big 12. Finally, the last year where they got the number down, they both exited. And they'll play next year in the SEC. I mean, there's things like that happen. Anybody get 2 + 2 to equal 4 instead of the emotion of it and the thrill of seeing all the movement? Why does everything happen with the Pac-12? Because their grant of rights runs out next year. Okay? It's USC, Oregon, Washington, UCLA seamlessly go to the Big Ten because they don't need an exit fee and there's no grant of rights issue. Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado go to the Big 12. No exit fee, okay? No grant of rights violation. Okay? Stanford and Cal are going to go to the ACC. No exit fee, no grant of rights violation. That's why the Pac-12 broke up. Their contract, they couldn't get a contract for anybody to sign. Now the question is what's going to happen with Oregon State and Washington State. Is it the American Conference? Is it the Mountain West? I know the two of them would love to go to the Big 12, but it sounds like the door is shut there right now. But they may go to the Mountain West. They may end up going to the American. I don't know. But it's, like I said, the Big 12, I give the Big 12 all the credit in the world. They get an A+ for survival. They get an A+ for their TV contract. I mean, it's $31.7 million per school, but they did really well with it. They get an A+ for that. Okay? With the additions, I'll give them a C+ on membership. I'm sorry, that is not I can't wait to watch that Titanic Kansas and Arizona State game. For the most part, that conference will be filler on TV. A lot of noon kickoffs. Or if they want to put a game at Arizona or Arizona State or Utah in the 10:30 time slot, they can. But that's what they're going to be. They're not going to be, I mean, what's the biggest single game that the Big 12 puts out every year? Which one is it?
The one that will not take place next year.
That's right, Oklahoma and
Oklahoma,
Texas, the Red River rivalry at the Cotton Bowl. Okay, next year that game will be in the SEC. Okay, what's the next biggest game in that conference?
Texas Tech, Oklahoma, anybody. Well, yeah.
You'll have Oklahoma next year.
Oklahoma next year. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay. There isn't a second one.
No.
Okay.
All of it's not taking place. That's
A+ for survival. Yeah. Okay. People thought 2 years ago they were goners. A+ for survival. A to A+ on getting the TV contract and jumping the line to do it because they weren't next. The Pac-12 was next.
Mm-hmm.
Jumped the line, got themselves locked in, and they put in escalators in the contract. That's how they're able to afford the additions because it's in there. Right? The Big Ten only had that for Notre Dame. They did not have it for anybody else. So Tony Petitti was able to work with Fox on the Washington and Oregon additions. So Tony worked that out. And Tony knows the landscape. I mean, there's no getting around it. He knows the landscape. I mean, this is a very sharp guy that understands what the deal is, especially when it comes to the media side. All that media experience he has is going to be invaluable. And now the college football playoff, the next step will be there'll be 4 champions that will get automatic bids plus a group of 5, which was probably going to be rephrased as, well, it might still just be the group of 5. There won't be an additional conference. There'll be 4 champions and a group of 5 representative. That means there'll be, to start out, 7 at-large bids next year instead of 6. And if things come to pass and you get to 16, 7 becomes 11 at large. Because Pac-12's gone. Mm-hmm. So they lose their seat at the table. Washington State and Oregon State have to find a place to land. And I hope they do because, look, let's look at Oregon State this year. They are ranked, They're a good football team this year. We'll see how DJ Uiagalelei does out there. He did win the starting job in Corvallis. But Jonathan Smith has a good team. And we talk about Oregon coming in. They beat Oregon last year. Mm-hmm. So a tough spot for them. They feel like they have one of their better teams in years at Oregon State. And no. Last night's games. I really don't know what to say about Nebraska. It's the same old refrain. Defensively, they played beautifully last night. The quarterback they brought in is from Georgia Tech, and he throws the big interception. And Jason, I saw. I'm looking at the highlight of it, and I'm like, I couldn't quite understand where he was throwing the ball.
Couldn't either.
I mean, there's 2 Minnesota guys there. So I wasn't quite sure, what was he trying to thread there? Because I didn't really see a Nebraska guy that would be the intended receiver. And they run it back. I give P.J. Fleck a lot of credit the way he handled the clock at the end because they were called for a false start, which brought with it a 10-second runoff. Some people would take the timeout at that point. He did not. He took the 10-second runoff and he had 1 timeout remaining. He took the 10-second runoff, and I give him a lot of credit because at the end when he needed to call a timeout, they ran a running play, and it got down to, 3-4 seconds to go, and he could run his kicker out there, and they called the timeout there. So he didn't take the timeout in the 10-second runoff, which is usually very tempting. If you have 2 timeouts, you definitely take it there. But he only had 1. He was like, okay, everybody get back to the line of scrimmage. As soon as they set the ball down, we're going, right? And it turned out, obviously paid off. Utah and Florida, they used 2 backup quarterbacks, including Barnes. And of course, we saw it. Barnes, people forget Rising got hurt at the end of the Ohio State Rose Bowl game. And Barnes actually came in the game and directed them to a touchdown. Rising got hurt in the third quarter of the Penn State game. Penn State was already in front. Penn State was already taking control of the game. It's something a lot of people, the Utah people, didn't quite get. You really weren't winning the game. We lost Rising. It's like you weren't winning with him. He was 7-22. But Barnes came in the game, struggled. Tig, Jair Brown picked him off. He did get a late touchdown, but I saw enough of him on tape because I know Rising gets banged up, so I want to see how Barnes looked in some games. So I watched the Washington State game last year, and he played well. And he did a good job last night, and so did Johnson in using the two quarterbacks, especially in the first half. He goes out and right away he hits Money Parks on the 70-yard touchdown pass. Welcome to Salt Lake City, right? My only response to the Florida people would be quite simple, and to the SEC people. At Utah, it just means more. Yeah. It's a great win for them. Great win for Kyle Whittingham.
Dominant win. 24-3 lead.
Yeah, 20. Ended up 24-11.
Yeah.
Graham Mertz did direct a 98-yard scoring drive through a touchdown pass. Florida had the ball the vast majority of the second half. They just, they could, but everything was methodical, and they were something like 1 for 14 on third down or some number like that in the game. NC State won at UConn, 24-14. If you're wondering, Penn State's next opponent, Delaware did win last night. They won at Stony Brook 37-14 or something like that, 37-13. They scored 13 fourth quarter points to put the game away. So it was 24-13 going into the fourth quarter. That's Penn State's next opponent, Delaware, so they won their opener last night. That's just on the information side of it. Ohio State will play Indiana this weekend, a conference game. And away we go. And we would like to take a moment, at least I would, I know you don't care, to salute a man going to his 50th season of play-by-play work at Pitt, and that is Bill Hillgrove. Yeah. Bill will begin his 50th season as the play-by-play voice of Pitt football. He's already in the College Football Hall of Fame. He is going into his 30th season as the play-by-play voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he'll be entering his 55th season as the play-by-play voice of Pitt basketball. Bill is 83 years old. The Pittsburgh Tribune did a great article on him about how he got into it. He went to try out for a play, and Sister, it was either Rosita or Sister Rosalia, whatever, one of the other nuns said to him, go down to see Sister Rosalia, I think, or something like that. She's casting a play. So she had him read something, and she says, great, you're perfect, right? I need a 13-year-old brat, right? And Bill said, well, that's great because that's what I am. But that voice work ever since, and the brilliance of the man, the work ethic of the man, the passion of the man, the ability to have people identify him with everything in Pittsburgh. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, the Steelers. He's special. I've talked to Bill enough over the years. I've spent time with Bill enough over the years. And really have great respect for him, both personally and professionally. So I want to at least salute Bill Hillgrove. Everybody always wants to talk about, Pitt, Penn State. Nobody likes, please stop it. Right? The state has some Bill Hillgrove in Pittsburgh, Merrill Reese with Philly, the Eagles.
Absolutely.
Okay. Harry Donahue with Temple.
Yeah.
Okay. There's some really, really first-class play-by-play guys for football in this state that I have great respect for and admire very much. Bill, Merrill, Harry, just great guys. Very fortunate. But hey, when somebody's going into their 50th year or something, like he has, you don't get as far as he's been able to get in his career unless you have been really, really good at your job. It is not. You may have great fortune that opens the door to the job, but it's your skill, your excellence, your passion, and your way of doing the job that allows you to keep it for 50 years. And to have the people that are in charge say, yeah, bring him back. And that's the way he's been. Really, at everything he's done. Whether it was he was at TAE in Pittsburgh for a long time. Right? And this will be his 30th season with the Steelers, 50th doing Pitt football, and the 55th doing Pitt basketball. I know it's a little, the Pitt basketball thing is going to be, with Dick Grote passing away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But they went through a couple. Yeah, obviously, with dealing with it with Pitt football, Bill Fralick, dealing with it with the Steelers with Tunch a couple of years ago, and Myron Cope as well. So
definitely,
and it's and he's really just done a great job. He's adjusted to everything, and everybody that's been on those networks has been very privileged to have had the chance to work with him. Bill is absolutely spectacular.
He is, and again, all the time I've spent with him. I don't care whether it was down in Pittsburgh or here in State College or, I remember spending time with him in Brooklyn because Penn State was in the same basketball tournament. They played each other. In fact, Steph Curry went to the game. He was courtside. He was Curry was taping the Tonight Show.
Oh, nice.
He was.
Yeah.
And it was over with. He came to the Penn State Pitt game at the Barclays Center. Yeah, Penn State blew him. I mean, Penn State won big. That's first time I saw Marcus Carr play. Jack Ham brought up to me yesterday about like guys moving all over the place. He said, Steve, that's his third team. I said, are you kidding me? I said, Marcus Carr? I said, I did games when he was at Pitt. I did a bunch of games when he was at Minnesota. I said, and the last game I said, was Penn State, Texas. There's Marcus Carr again. I was kidding the Texas guys. I said, I think I've done more of his games than you have. Yeah, but Bill, salute to you.
Absolutely.
Great admiration and respect for him. All right. These are always the fun weekends. So, and also, let's salute somebody else, too, in our business. Alabama is going to play Middle Tennessee State, returning to the broadcast booth after an experience that they weren't sure he would survive with cancer. And he was in the hospital for over 150 days. Eli Gold will be back in the Alabama radio broadcast booth tomorrow. Now, what they've decided to do is this. Chris Stewart, and I know Chris from doing basketball at Alabama, great guy. And, of course, I've known Eli for, I think I go back 35 years with Eli, 30 to 35 years, right? Chris Stewart filled in for him last year. So what they're going to do is Eli will do the home games this year. Chris is going to do the road games. That way Eli doesn't have to travel. Yep. And that'll be great. But just the mere fact that he is back, right? Touchdown, Alabama. Well, and we've had Eli on the show a few times. And he's just the consummate professional and gentleman. Whether it was calling NASCAR, Alabama. You know what his favorite sport is? You know what Eli's favorite sport is?
I don't.
Hockey.
Hockey? I did not know that.
Eli grew up in New York. I think he grew up in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Right? Okay. He was a Rangers season ticket holder in the top row, and he actually did some of the WHA games in Birmingham. right? Play by play. But yeah, I remember Eli and I were talking one time about, at this point he gave up the basketball a few years ago. But at this point he was still doing it. And he was doing football, basketball, and then Alabama softball and a little bit of baseball, right? So he's doing that. And the two of us were talking, and I said, I'm fortunate. I said, I get to do football, basketball, and baseball. I said, I know you're sort of doing the same thing. I said, do you get the feeling in some ways it keeps you fresh? And he goes, oh. And we talked for like 15 minutes about that. And he said, oh, Steve, I go from one to the other. He says, and it's just because it's a different pace, different kind of game, so forth. He says, it just like is a re-energize every single time. It's not going from one to then doing an entire year of one thing. He said, I like the fact I can change paces like that. And of course, NASCAR. If anybody's ever heard a NASCAR broadcast, and Eli no longer does that, but the precision with which auto racing is on radio is absolutely remarkable to me. Let's go down to Jason Lord in the pits today. Hey, 4 tires put on. Okay. All right, full tank, out he goes. Boom. Let's go over to turn 4.
Yeah.
Here in turn 4. Hey, come flying through here.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and Eli was critical to that for years. So it's just great to know that Eli will be back in the booth, because he went through a lot in the past year. I mean, like when you sit down and read the story, and I've reached out to him, so when you read the story, I mean, it was because nobody knew for a long time, because he was out and nobody said why he was out last year. I mean, nobody said why. But he'll be back doing the home games, so he'll have Middle Tennessee, and then the 4 road games Alabama has. I think they don't play another. I think all their non-cons are home, right?
Yeah, because Texas is definitely home. Yep.
Yeah. So Eli will do 8 of the games. Chris Stewart will do 4, and then I think they have to decide as to how they want to handle either the SEC championship game if they get there, or bowl game, playoff game, whatever. They'll have to decide how they want to do it. But yeah. At least we're talking about games.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know we had to talk on realignment because the ACC voted today, but yeah, it's suddenly out of nowhere, 2 teams that are miles from the Pacific Coast are playing in a conference name for the Atlantic Coast. The Friday night game, by the way, the Friday night game tonight is Louisville and Georgia Tech. By the way, St. Francis played Western Michigan tough last night.
Yeah.
I think Western Michigan finally won it, right?
Yes.
Tonight, Central Michigan plays Michigan State at 7 on Fox Sports 1. Louisville and Georgia Tech. This is why the ACC has a problem. Okay? With all due respect to Louisville and Georgia Tech, are you streaming to your TV sets tonight to watch it? No. Okay? And it's a conference game. Okay? I'm not talking about it's a non-conference game. It's a non-conference game. They're the prohibitive favorite. Okay? Right? No. It's a conference game. And people, okay, great. Missouri State, Kansas, that's on ESPN Plus. Stanford, Hawaii is the late night game from Honolulu at 11 o'clock tonight on CBS Sports Net. Miami of Ohio and Miami of Florida play not in Ohio, in Florida. And that's on ACC Network. Central Michigan, Michigan State, I mentioned, is on Fox Sports 1. Eastern Michigan is hosting Howard, and that's on ESPN Plus. So there you are. And tomorrow, Virginia, Tennessee, East Carolina, Michigan, that's on Peacock. Colorado, TCU is the noon game tomorrow, big noon kickoff, the debut of Deion Sanders. Arkansas State, Oklahoma. Utah State is at Iowa. Mercer is at Ole Miss. Portland State's at Oregon. You can always tell the ones that Vegas didn't even put on the board. 3:30, Ohio State's at Indiana. Boise State's at Washington tomorrow. Rice is at Texas. Tennessee State is at Notre Dame. Buffalo is at Wisconsin. 6 o'clock, UT Martin is at Georgia. Nevada is at USC. It says here USC is a 38-point favorite. It's a big number. At, Southeastern Missouri is at Kansas State. You were in the hallway saying you put some bundle on Southeast Missouri. I was like, okay. Said you liked their quarterback. Didn't know what that meant. New Mexico is at Texas A&M. We already mentioned Middle Tennessee playing at Alabama. South Alabama is at Tulane. And here's a really interesting game, too, that's a little under the radar, but I think it's interesting. North Carolina, South Carolina.
Yeah.
Down in Columbia. The Duke's Mayo Classic. Is that, you know what? I wonder if that's in Charlotte. Is that one in Charlotte?
Could be.
Let's see. Yeah, it's in Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium. So it's in Charlotte. Then Sunday there are two games. The aforementioned Oregon State will take on San Jose State. San Jose State actually, I thought, gave a pretty good account of itself against USC. And they moved the ball. Then LSU is playing Florida State in Orlando. And that is the Sunday night game at 7:30 on ABC. And that is, to me, definitely a game worth watching. Yeah. And then back to more ACC action. The Monday game is Clemson at Duke. Okay, except for the fact that you just really, 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 really want to watch football. Right? Who is going to sit there and go, that's appointment TV? Welcome to another night in the ACC.
No.
Hey, Louisville, Georgia Tech tonight, very little appeal. No. Clemson at Duke, very little appeal. Now, the non-con game, LSU, Florida State, involving an SEC and an ACC school, Camping World kickoff down in Orlando, that one is one that you would look at and say, yep, I really want to watch that game. And that game I really want to watch. I couldn't watch Utah and Florida last night because I had a Spikes game. Same thing with Minnesota and Nebraska. Yep. So everything I picked up from those games were either from highlights or other notes. But, yeah, it's a big weekend.
Sure.
You seem to be nonplussed. You're not excited.
No, that's always excitement when it's first weekend. Second weekend for high school, first weekend for college football. Really first weekend. I think week 0 is appropriate for last weekend. But, yeah, very excited to get the chance to be under the lights.
One quick note on the Pirates. The Fenway Sports Group bought AT&T Sportsnet.
Yeah.
Okay? So everything with the Penguins is probably going to stay exactly the way you see it.
Yep.
Exactly the way. But the Pirates have to make a decision as to whether to stay with AT&T Sportsnet or now with the Fenway Sports Group, whatever it's called now, or sell their rights back to Major League Baseball, which could dramatically change what you see on TV. So we have to wait to see what the Pirates decide. The Penguins, it looks like, let's start with this part. Who owns the Penguins? The Fenway Sports Group. Right? So nothing's changing. Yeah. Okay? So you're fine with the Penguins. It's the Pirates that may be one of those how do we find the game mode next year, because they have options, but they might do what the Padres and the Diamondbacks did and sell their rights back to Major League Baseball and have MLB produce it. Because their contract is up with AT&T Sportsnet.
Yeah.
Wow. They were getting $61 million a year from that.
Yeah.
Imagine them getting less money. What would they do?
Right.
They could raise ticket prices.
They could.
The legendary Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric, famously once said, quote, "Any idiot can raise prices." And that's how we'll end the show. I read it. Jack Ham gave me a great Wall Street Journal article. Great article. Right? Just very quickly about, you know what the average bundle is on your cable? How much it actually costs in your bill? The average bundle. There's several bundles on
say, yeah.
The average is 49 cents. Okay? You want to know what ESPN now what your cable charges for ESPN? How much do you think it is?
Oh, it's probably over. ESPN alone is over $6-7 at this point.
$9.42.
Unbelievable.
And it's not helped by the fact that Indiana Jones bombed.
Yeah.
The Marvel franchise is kind of running out of things to produce.
Yep.
And the theme parks, they have jacked up the prices so high that they're shocked that attendance went down. Oh, really? You're shocked? And they wonder why their stock price went from 200 to 87. They're back where they were stock price wise, where they were 9 years ago. 2014.
Yep.
But enough of that. Okay? I know you're already going to Memorial Field. I know you're going to be sitting there alone for hours. But, that is who you are.
That's right.
Tell Adam Sheets I said hi.
Absolutely.
Have a great